welcome to episode 1 of the Open Mind podcast. Together, we are going to go on a journey talking about addiction. So, what is addiction? Gabor Maté states, addiction is anything that we crave that gives us instant relief from pain but leaves us with negative consequences. If you do not know who Gabor Maté is, I suggest you go and look him up. He has amazing teachings, knowledge and wisdom around the subjects of trauma and addiction. So, I'm going to share a little bit of my life experience in regards to the subject of addiction. I'm going to bring it back to my grandparents and my parents. My grandparents on my father's side. Their addictive behaviours were mainly related to overworking and having a really high level of sugar intake. Excuse me. As a result of that, my father ended up having the same addiction behaviours. He was extremely addicted to work and sugar. Dad went his whole life never seen the issue he had with working. In his head, there was no wrong in what he was doing because he was playing the role as a provider to his wife and to his children. Dad only started to see the negative consequences of his addiction to sugar a few years ago when the fizzy drinks he was having started to have an impact on his health. He started to have acid reflux as well as constant heartburn. When Dad developed these physical problems, he started to see the issues with his addiction to sugar. So he started a journey on cutting the intake down and taking back his health. The only behaviour that I seen in my father that wasn't the same as his parents is episodes he has with alcohol. So I have noticed a pattern in my father's life from the time my grandmother died. Years ago when he lost his mother, he leaned on alcohol as a coping mechanism to help him sleep and to help him manage his pain. The second time I see my father go on a journey using this as a coping mechanism was when my sister died, and then again when my mother died. My father's strength has always been really strong, so every time he has fell into this pattern, he has quickly taken himself back out of it again. Other than the pattern attached to grief, my father has never showed any signs of having addictive behaviours when it comes to alcohol. He has never touched a drug in his life, and he was not a smoker neither. So I want to talk about my mum a little bit and her family. My grandparents on my mother's side. My nana was a chronic smoker. She would have smoked probably 40 to 60 cigarettes a day. She was also addicted to. My grandfather was a raving alcoholic, and he was also an abuser, a physical and a sexual abuser. As a result of this, my mother ended up carrying behavioural traits like that. Mum became a man-hater because of the environment she grew up in, watching her own father. She became a chronic smoker like my nana, and she was also very addicted to misery. An example of that, my mother really struggled with forgiveness to herself or to anybody else. As a result of that, she ended up developing Alzheimer's disease and dying very young. That's another story for another episode on this podcast. There is one addiction behaviour trait that my mother had that my grandparents didn't have, and that was spending money. She was a shopaholic. It was the only real pleasure that she got in life. So isn't it funny to think that both parents followed in the footsteps of their parents with the same behaviour traits when it comes to addictions? Then I want to have a little look at me and my siblings, the family that my mother and father created together. Every single one of us, the 6 of us, we all became chronic smokers like Mam. Some of us are addicted to misery like she was too. Some of us developed the spending problem. But one thing we all did that Mum and Dad didn't do, and God bless them, they hadn't got a fucking clue how to manage it, was drugs. My mum and dad come from a time when drugs was not a thing. But in the 80s, drugs had our family home. Unfortunately, my eldest brother and one of my sisters fell victim to heroin and crack cocaine. Their journey with this drug in the 80s made our family home a place of chaoticness. The addiction with drugs did not stop with them, unfortunately. I have 2 brothers under them that ended up going down the same road. One not with heroin and crack, with other drugs. And then myself. I was lucky enough to escape the rabbit hole of crack and heroin. But I was smoking weed from the age of 11, and I tried every party drug on the market. I think it's a little bit funny that we all ended up following in the footsteps of our grandparents. It didn't stop until somebody was brave enough to face their pain, feel their pain, and let it go. That somebody was little old me. So the message that I am here today to give is a little bit deep. There's a saying in the AA and the NA world, and it goes like this: look for similarities, not differences. I learned this the hard way. I believed for many years that I was different to my brothers and sisters because of my choice of drug being different to them. I believed that I was different because my actions on my choice of drug was completely different to the actions of them on their choice of drug. I see no similarities at all. My family home has been destroyed by drugs. We have been at war with each other because of this. I have a brother that spent 16 years of his life a fully blown heroin and crack cocaine addict. He is nearly 10 years sober from drugs now, but he is still an addict because he is addicted to misery. He never faced his pain, he never faced his truth, and he never let go of the trauma. Most people that give up drugs end up suffering in life still because the drugs is not the real problem. It's the pain. The pain is the source of all of the problems. And until we heal that pain, the repeated pattern is going to keep on happening. Another message I want to share about how arrogant I was to looking at differences instead of similarities. I spent nearly 10 years in a relationship with my kid's father. And again, we both knew going into that relationship that we both had addictive behaviours. And for a long time, we looked at each other with a lot of similarities, a lot of understanding, and a lot of love. But by the end, little old me was looking at him very differently. In my eyes, he was a scumbag with an addiction problem that was ruining our family. And in my eyes, I was a victim of his addiction, and there was nothing wrong with my addiction. I feel sorry for him and sorry for my children. Because of me having this perspective, I caused more harm to our family that we created with my reaction to his action that he took out of his head on drugs. It took me 6 years of healing work to be able to see this man in the eyes of similarities. What do I mean by that? We were both two individuals drowning in pain and trauma. Instead of being able to see that, we went to war with each other, full of ego, thinking who was right and who was wrong. In reality, there was no right or wrong. There was two souls drowning, sleepwalking. So the message that I want to give today is for everybody to stop sleepwalking, to stop looking at everybody else with differences, and to open your eyes and to see the similarities. As a society, it's drilled in us to look down on our neighbour, to look down on the addict on the street. And it's absolute disgusting. Since the 80s, we have been living in a fucking hellhole of absolute bullshit. And it's time that something changed. It's 2024, lads. There's so much knowledge, there's so much awareness, and there's so much wisdom in this world. So why are we all going around doing what we're doing to each other? Looking down our nose, being judgmental, thinking we're different. Just stop it. Please stop it. It's time to be kinder to yourself and to your neighbour. It's time to face yourself, face your truth, and heal. It takes a lot of strength and courage, but we all have the power inside of us. I really, really hope that you take something from this episode. Thank you so much for coming on and listening in, and I will see you all again very, very soon. Goodbye.